Hi, everybody. Awesome, nice job. I'm going to try to keep this to 15 minutes, then we'll do some Q&A. The best question askers will get these awesome t-shirts, so think of good questions. I was telling Thomas that I'm going to be the most depressing talk of the entire day, so I apologize in advance. Hopefully some of you know of us. We're a data company. We collect data on emerging industries, private companies, investors, and we rate those industries, investors, and startups. So that's a little bit about us. We have some cool people who like us. All right, so this is the sort of general theme of the beginning of this talk is there's a lot of new fund formation, right? There's new accelerators, there's new micro VCs, and so there's this micro VC glut, right? And I think the gentleman from Horsley Bridge kind of talked about this earlier, which is, everybody kind of comes in and the pitch is kind of homogenous, right? And so, this is the reality though, right? I think Scott Cooper from Andreessen Horowitz mentioned it, lots of funds at the sub $100 million level. But here's the problem, right? If those of you have seen this Lake Wobegon quote, not everybody can be above average, right? And so I think when you hear the narrative a lot, everybody sort of seems like they are above average, right? But that just is mathematically impossible. So how do you measure this, right? So I think the challenge with emerging funds or accelerators or angels even who are starting VC funds is there's not a track record, right? And so what we've been trying to do is figure out how can you model the effectiveness of these investors looking at non-performance-based metrics. And if anybody wants this deck, by the way, you could just tweet at CB Insights and somebody on our team will be sending it out. So you don't have to take notes or whatever. So we looked at kind of follow-on rates as one really important dimension of the quality of a seed fund. And so there's a lot of narrative that if you have a large fund in your seed round, that'll have signaling issues, and if they don't invest in the follow-on round, you're going to have problems. But the reality was when we looked at when multi-stage funds participate, so meaning larger funds participate in your seed round, you have a much higher actual likelihood of raising follow-on funding than when only a seed VC funds you. So again, there's the data that says that not all seed VCs, for instance, are able to get their companies follow-on funding. But even though all of them will not be great, some will be. And so like all parts of venture, there's going to be a power law. And so the power law basically in returns is that a few exits in venture make up the vast majority of the value. And so this is the top 100 exits in tech since 2009. That big bar is Facebook, and then you see WhatsApp and Groupon and Zynga, and then it just gets a lot smaller. The distribution of fund returns is also going to be very similar. So there's going to be a very small select group of micro VCs that's going to take the vast majority of the returns in this asset class. And like in general VC, the wins are concentrated among a few, right? So this is, if you look at that top 100, here's who actually is in the vast majority of them, right? So it's Sequoia and NEA and a lot of household names. And in 5 years, we're going to have a micro VC chart like this, and there's going to be a handful. There's going to be one guy up here, and there's going to be a couple more, and then it's going to trail off, right? So there's no reason to think that this time the distribution returns will be any different. So the other hard part and this is the challenge, I think, of micro VC or angel or anything is how do you get into the big winners early, right? So we looked at since 2004 to 2013, how many investors, VCs, were in more, or how many over $1 billion exits were they in? There were 68 investors who were in one $1 billion exit or more, right? And so if you believe the idea that maybe you got, people can get lucky once, right? Who's actually been in two? And then you see it really declines, right? The number of people who've been in two or more exits and then all the way down into the $8 billion plus exits is very rarefied sort of air. And then where did they get in, right? So how many actually got in at the Series A or earlier, right? Who saw around a corner and got in early? That's even more difficult, right? So again, this is just to sort of give you context that there's no reason to believe accelerators, micro VCs, angels will not follow a very similar kind of distribution to this. So who cares about this, right? So here are the folks that we are seeing care. What's been interesting for us is to see the LP community is really, really interested in this, right? So, you know, if you want to get into Sequoia and Kleiner or Excel or whoever you think of as top tier Greylock, it's not easy to do that, right? So a lot of LPs are trying to figure out who are the emerging fund managers that I should be spending time with. So, you know, they want to figure out who is the next Sequoia, Excel, Greylock. Larger VCs are looking at who are the micro VCs and angels that we should be talking to, who has deal flow, who should we be, you know, getting information from. Corporates, M&A, innovation strategy are trying to figure out who's the early stage folks that we should be talking to. Startups are interested in it, obviously, as well. So how do you do this, right? There's, in our view, sort of an excessive reliance on the narrative, right? Who tells a good story? It's very opaque, and then the data is immature. So we try to solve this with data, right? So we're scoring companies and industries and all this stuff. So we kind of have this algo, and I won't go into each one of these things. I'm going to go through a few dimensions, and then we'll get into some names to show you who we think kind of comes out on top right now. So one of the big things in venture is this idea of network centrality, right? And so it's kind of Google PageRank for investors, right? So if you have lots of links to other investors, that's a good thing. And if you have links to high quality investors, so it's like if you have a link on from your website to harvard.edu, you know, or harvard.edu has a link to your website that gives us sort of more comfort, right? And so this is the network map of Felicis Ventures, and you know what you see is, well, it's hard to see it. Hopefully, when you get the deck for real, you'll see the names. But you know, they have a lot of connections with Sequoia, Founders Fund, SV Angel, First Round. The other way we look at this is, you know, who tends to invest with you, who invests after you. So it's another visualization here. So who's invested after Floodgate, right? So another sort of high quality micro VC, and you see who invests after them. So if smart money tends to follow on with them, that gives you more comfort that this is a great fund. So you see First Round, Insight, Andreessen Horowitz, Kleiner Perkins. So, you know, kind of some household names, right? So if you have to pick between two micro VCs, the one who has follow-on partners that resemble this is more interesting than the guy who got Anand Ventures to follow on in their company, right? So that's sort of what this is hopefully telling you. So we looked at network centrality amongst angels, and so I'm not going to read all these names off to you, but you see here is kind of who we had as sort of the strongest network, right? And so you see, you know, Alexis Ohanian up top, and who tends to follow on in his investments, right? So this gives you some sense for the quality of the investment sort of partners and syndicate relationships they have. Then on the top, micro VCs, right? Again, probably some familiar names, maybe some not so familiar names. So, you know, what's interesting here is you see SV Angels at top in terms of centrality, and then they're also, because it's a network score, are also one of the top co-investors with other micro VCs, right? Top corporate VCs, I know that this wasn't as much a part of this track, but again, there's a lot of capital coming in from the corporate segment. Not all corporate VCs are obviously created equal. Here's some of the best networked. Follow-on rates we think are really important for angels and micro VCs. So who is able to get their companies the next round of funding, right? You know, a lot of the earlier statistics are about how much money it takes to scale companies to get them to IPOs. So it's unlikely that your, you know, Instagrams aside, it's unlikely that a small one round of capital is going to be the billion-dollar exit. So, you know, who has the best follow-on rate? And I think there's going to be some names here that maybe you're unfamiliar. Top micro VCs by follow-on rate. Again, you see some same names, some different. You know, and then when we look at all of our different dimensions, sort of the 6 dimensions that we look at to score folks, Naval, who spoke earlier, kind of comes out up top, and you'll see, you know, a bunch of folks here. So, so that's everything I got. So I'm not sure how I did on time. All right, cool. So yeah, if you have questions, I'm happy to take them. If you want the deck, just tweet at us, and we'll send it over. So thank you. Yeah, so, well, no, it was just the micro VCs. So this track is sort of focused on sort of the emerging kind of managers. So that was it. We in the larger, oh, sorry, let me just repeat the question. Asked if there was data on just larger VCs, and the answer is just for this track, the focus was really on the more emerging fund managers. So, but we've done a lot about the larger funds as well.
You have data on geographical split Essentially, what's happening outside of that?
Yeah, so the top investors are all here. I mean, it's just the reality. I mean, we're based in New York, so it maybe pains me to say it a little bit, but the big dogs are all here in the Valley. But we haven't looked at it geographically. I think one of the things that is unique is the micro VC phenomena is sort of a Valley, creature, right? And I think it's starting to spread. We're seeing it in New York now, and I'm not sure Boston has a really thriving scene quite yet. So I'm not even sure this is a trend that's made its way all that far. Probably is coming, but it's still pretty Valley-centric, I would say.
So that was a social graph of who's connected with whom.
Yeah.
There's no tie to actual outcome. So how do we know that that social graph translates to the only meaningful thing, which is outcome?
Yeah, so there is not enough time series data. There's not data on the returns yet, right? So all of this is looking at, a lot of this is academic literature that's found that these are things that correlate with returns, right? So strength of network has been found amongst VCs to be a driver of fund performance, right? The ability to get follow-on investment is a driver of fund performance. Consistency in sectors that you invest in is another driver of fund performance, right? So when a fund is ed tech one month and enterprise the next month and big data the next month, right, versus somebody who's more thematic and focused, right? Again, like the academic sort of research on that. So we've tried to take a lot of that research and just translate it into the algorithm, so. Any other questions?
So in the beginning of your talk, you were saying that micro VCs, they don't have a track record yet. So
Yeah.
that you're saying that strength of network is something you can look at, right?
Yep.
Are there other things besides that that you're also using to predict?
Yeah, so there's sort of, I didn't spend a lot of time on it. So there's kind of 6 measures that we try to look at. So this is, so network strength is kind of the brand. Selection aptitude basically means your ability to get into companies early, right? So one of the things we've noticed with angels is, with secondary market transactions, some will brag about being in Uber, or I shouldn't take Uber, but let's say somebody who's bought Facebook on the secondary market. So you shouldn't get credit. We don't give you credit in our model for buying in when it's already a known quantity, right? So selection aptitude is that. Illiquid portfolio strength, which is what micro VCs really have to be sort of measured on right now, which is what's the value or the quality of the portfolio that has not exited yet. So we do some work around that. Follow-on rates I talked about. And then performance persistence is not something that there's enough data on, but the idea in venture is that unlike public markets, you read the past performance doesn't predict the future. That's untrue in private markets, right? So in private markets, performance persistence is there. So funds that have done well in the past or investors who've done well in the past tend to do well at least in the N+1 fund, right? So because there's information asymmetry and the markets are really imperfect. So those 6 things kind of drive our collective score. The data visualization stuff looks a lot more interesting on the network graph, so it's better, it has more visual appeal, so.
Are you finding that LPs are using this
Yeah.
information?
Yeah, so we kind of stumble into markets, and so LPs was one of them, right? And so we had an LP call us and say, hey, listen, I'm getting a lot of micro VC pitches, and they all sound sort of the same to me, right? It was literally the Horsley Bridges comment. Entrepreneur who did well in another thing, made some money on angel investments, is like, hey, I want to professionalize this. And so they're looking for some way to cull the universe, and so that's been something we've been spending a lot of time helping them figure out. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was discussing pretty much everything with tech on healthcare and life sciences. Does this model still apply for healthcare and life sciences?
Yeah, it does. The only thing I'd say is brand is probably less relevant in the, I think, the tech side of things, like the public branding is much more prominent. On the healthcare side, we sort of overweight certain other dimensions because they're not tweeting about, I don't know, whatever, something passing some government regulatory thing, but yeah, otherwise the same dimensions hold.
think every micro VC now, because you have a branding there, do you think the trend is everybody has to brand themselves on Twitter? You know, investor in the past has never gone to the front, you know, be a front face to promote their fund.
Right.
It's always only promote the company they invest in. Now it's kind of like everybody need to promote their fund, and then that become a criteria. Then of course everybody needs, you know, before they have a markup, they have to promote. Is that a trend you see?
Yeah, I mean, we see it a lot more. You know, I don't know if it's a good or bad thing. That's not really my area of expertise, but we see it a lot more. I think, you know, we've heard VCs say, like, if you're not on Twitter, you know, entrepreneurs shouldn't trust the VCs who aren't on Twitter, right? Like, there's just like ridiculous shit like that gets said. So, you know, but you know, some people take that to heart and they do it, and some people keep a lower profile. But you know, it is an important driver, I think, especially in tech, especially at the early stages, right? Like with all this noise that's out there, brand becomes very important to differentiate yourself, right? Because everybody's money is green otherwise, so.
Can you talk to maybe any patterns that you've seen, particularly in the micro VC space, with respect to sort of fund sizes? So some that are $10 to $20 million versus those that are 50, 60, 70 million, and then what about in terms of the partnership structure as well? Some are sort of more of a single GP that are investing versus some that are using more of a team-based approach.
Yeah, so we don't really get into their approach necessarily. So we kind of look at the data, and that's sort of it. So I can't comment on the second part. I think on the fundraising side, you know, so wherever that was, I think the one thing that, and I think this will take time to, suss out is, you know, so I'm not sure, you know, this is what is available, right? And I think this is sort of what maybe the LPs are comfortable doing in a first sort of micro VC. So I think this might be a function of what LPs are interested in, like sort of funding. What we're seeing though is micro VCs, the few that have a track record, always, almost invariably are going upstream in terms of fund size, right? So I think that's gonna be one of the questions that's to be determined, is that can you build a franchise for, you know, on a $50 million fund, you know, a fund 2, a fund 3, a fund 4, or are you going to, once you have some success, just naturally try to go get 100 and 200 and go up market? We're seeing the few folks who have a track record generally are going, you know, up market or doing like growth sidecars and other things. So yeah, I mean, that's just the thesis right now. It's not enough data. Cool. All right, I gotta go. Thanks.